Gentlemen, anyone notice anything peculiar about Seaman First Class Urban?
Toll road, get him up. Trench?
Oh, this is embarrassing.
Yeah, sure is.
But being a Gemini, I just never know what to expect.
Starting the show off right with some unruly ape action. And if you know anything about me, I am a big fan of ape action of every and any sort. It's chimps specifically, but gorillas and apes are pretty good too. Hi, I'm Mark. Speaking of a chimp, I am the Cinemaniac. You, not chimps at all. You are fine, upstanding, intelligent people watching programs such as this. You are hopefully a Cinemaniac, and thus, together as one, we are the titular Cinemaniacs. I have films to talk about this week. I've seen actually new to me, new to you, new like just came out movies. It's not as much catch up this week as it has been for the last several. Saw some films locally here in Keene, New Hampshire. Saw some films in New York City. Saw some films in Pennsylvania. Have a couple that aren't even on the list I might talk about if I don't yap too much about this first group. Very interesting. So we're in a little bit of a holding pattern right now, but starting, I believe, this week, we're going to see a lot of new releases coming out. Boom, 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 leading up to Christmas. That new Space Battles, Star Wars, the new Star Wars movie is going to be coming out, The Rise of Skywalker, soon. And I noticed that I'll be seeing it. I already have my ticket. My lady and I are seeing this at the Alamo Draft House in Yonkers. And they've basically turned themselves into a grindhouse for the month of late December for Star Wars. They've got showtime starting at 10 a.m. and I think the last show of the day is at like 1 in the morning. And this is, naturally it's a movie about space things with lasers, so it's 2.5 hours long. And that'll be starting at 1 in the morning. So they're basically only going to be closed for a couple hours to clean the theater, and then they're going to start all over again. So I'm really interested to see what that's going to be like. But we're not talking about that yet. That's not for a couple weeks. We're going to talk about this, which we'll talk about over there, because the man was kind enough to set up 2 cameras so that I can do this and look dramatic. We have a new film, brand new, just opened on Thursday, starring and produced by Mark Ruffalo. True story about a corporate lawyer who was employed to defend chemical companies against lawsuits, finds himself going against a chemical company with a lawsuit brought to him from a small town in, I don't remember where that small town was, West Virginia, I believe, where the drinking supply is sort of not doing the town any favors, and people are getting sick, and animals are dying, and what is in these dark waters? You didn't see that. So, based on a true story, and frightening. It's a drama, but this plays kind of like a horror movie at times. Again, the situation is Mark Ruffalo is a lawyer at a large firm in the city, Cincinnati, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And this farmer who knows his grandmother shows up one day in the corporate office saying, here's a box full of videotapes, you need to see this, you need to help me fix this, because basically there's a Dow chemical plant very close to his property, and it is poisoning all of the water system in the town. It's killing his cattle, it's making people sick, and how do we fight this company that employs the entire town, and nobody wants to go against the company that keeps everyone afloat, so to speak. So Ruffalo takes on this impossible task of going against what he is as his profession and the people in his firm and the chemical companies that have sort of helped him get where he's going to go, and try to take them on and prove that this stuff is happening. It's very, I don't want to say this is very timely, because this kind of crap has been timely for the last 50 years and will continue to be timely, unfortunately. It's an important movie for people to see, just to be aware of this thing, because it's not news that, large companies, especially chemical companies, pollute, but when you see the level that this was going on and how much they were aware of it as the film unfolds, it makes you want to be more aware of what's going on around you and hold people accountable. It'll make you frightened, it'll make you sad, it'll make you angry, and it really happened and it's still happening. It's really well done. Like, again, I went in not knowing anything about this actual case or story. It may have been on the news, but that shows you how much I pay attention. And as it went on, it was just more and more things are revealed. It's almost like a mystery, and more things are brought to the front that are shocking, and it is just, as I said, sad, scary, disturbing, and in a tiny way uplifting at times. Everybody in it's quite good. Ruffalo fights for causes such as this, so he was behind the film being made to some degree. He's very good. He's always good. Tim Robbins as his boss, and then some other Anne Hathaway as his wife. Everybody in it is quite good. A lot of actors that are unknown to the average person. One that was odd to me is the farmer who gets the whole story in motion. His accent was very strange, and my first gut reaction was that he was British playing American. But then when I looked it up, and he's not. He's actually from New England to some degree. So it was just a very odd choice for the accent. It may be accurate to the actual person who he was portraying, but it was kind of hard to make out at times, and I was really wondering kind of what was going on. I just couldn't pinpoint where this guy was supposed to have come from, but kind of a minor quibble in a movie that's overall quite good. If you've seen movies like Erin Brockovich or Civil Action or other movies that are sort of legal thrillers, because you see a lot about the legal process, which I thought was very fascinating, about what you have to do to prove a case and to make a case work and to gather evidence and how you gather evidence and all of that. It's not boring and dry. I thought it was very interesting and very exciting, that aspect of the film. And a lot of it operates on just a human level. These are, average people in a small town who are just trying to get by, and it's a big evil entity, a big, evil just in terms of what they did to these people is against them, and how do you fight that? And it's very, very good. So I don't have a heck of a lot more to say other than don't confuse this with the excellent Japanese horror film Dark Water, which I would also recommend, or the American remake, which I think may have been called Dark Waters. This is a new film. This is in theaters now. I don't see this as having a lot of legs in the theater. I think this will be around for a little while, but as you see the bigger movies, like what do we have this week? We have Jumanji coming out, and we have something else, and then we have Star Wars. A movie like Dark Waters is going to get probably put into smaller and smaller theaters and then given the bum's rush. So if you like intelligent films about reality that might make you a little ticked off, this is a very good one to go see, and it's a movie for grown-ups, which is nice because we don't get a whole lot of those. Speaking of movies for grown-ups, the next film is actually very much a movie for grown-ups. This is a new British film, or 2018, but new to us, opened this week. I just saw this at the Alamo Drafthouse Yonkers last night. It's pretty limited play. This probably is just larger markets right now, but this may come around. I would call this more of an art house film than anything else. A24 put it out, who had done things like Midsummer, and that actually got a lot of play. So you may have some luck seeing this. This is a film, a very strange film, a horrifying film, a funny film, a weird film about this department store in England who's having a sale on their wonderful line of clothing. And a woman buys a very interesting looking dress, and the dress may or may not be possessed or cursed or evil. She finds out the true meaning of fear in fabric. So not a movie for everybody. This is very much an art house film. This is very much a weird film. I went in only having heard that it was sort of Euro horror inspired, and it was very strange, and it was a horror movie, and I'm all for all of those things. Same director as a film called Berberian Sound Studio from a couple of years ago that was also Euro horror flavored throwback kind of strange thriller horror film. This is much stranger. This is certainly inspired by Argento and European Italian horror of the 70s. It's all in English. It's set in England. It's got maybe two people you would recognize. It has Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who has been in a lot of British drama over the years, and Julian Barrett, who is familiar to most people who would know him would be from the Mighty Boosh TV series. He's in it in a very much comedic comedy relief role that I found very funny. I love his performance, and what they give him to do is very funny. So what is this? So a woman, Jean-Baptiste, who we talked about before, she, middle-aged divorcee, looking to go on dates through Lonely Hearts ads, goes to this strange, weird Euro cult horror, retro, futuristic department store where the attendants speak very strangely and look very strange. And she buys this dress that basically makes her sick, and it has a mind of its own. It's really hard. It's not really clearly described or it's just weird, okay? So I don't need everything spelled out for me. I love Suspiria, and a whole lot of Suspiria doesn't make sense. And I like Inferno, and a whole lot of Inferno doesn't make sense. But overall, it kind of does, and the visuals carry it. The visuals are very interesting in this at times. There are some certainly very creepy moments. There are certainly very beautiful moments in terms of the color and the production design and the costuming. But overall, the whole thing just didn't work for me. I was with it up to a point. You go along with sort of one storyline up to a point, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden you're with some other person. And I'm like, oh, okay, the movie's not over. How long is this going to go? And it keeps going, and then it kind of shifts to another person, and I'm like, where are we going with this? It stopped being interesting to me, and I just was sort of ready for it to be over, which maybe it's just me. I'm having this happen more and more with films where I'm with it to a point, and then I stop caring, and I just want it to stop. And that's what happened with In Fabric for me. The performances were pretty good overall, but it's like it's very serious and creepy, and then it's like wacky funny. And I don't know how to balance the two of those very well. And then it gets really very silly for a long stretch. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. This is one of those movies that feels like it's being weird for the sake of being weird. And some of the performances that are trying to be weird or amusing are just like silly. And it's hard for me to describe without going into much detail. I think if you are interested in seeing this, going in blind is probably better, like I did. So I don't want to say too much about the plot, which I don't like to talk about anyway. Certainly, it has that Euro horror feel. If you like that sort of thing, the score is really good. The opening titles feel like an older movie, but it also felt like a bit of a wank to me, which I see a lot. It was produced by Ben Wheatley, whose films I haven't really enjoyed because they often seem like they're a seed of a good idea, but then they just kind of throw it away. And this felt the same way. It felt like somebody felt like they were above horror, perhaps, and they sort of made a horror movie, but I'm not going to really commit to it being a horror movie, so I'm just going to kind of toss this off and be kind of silly about this and kind of frivolous about that. And it's like if this had committed to being a straight thriller horror film without the silly stuff, it probably would have worked very well for me. But ultimately, it was just a kind of a mess, I thought. Like, yeah, the style is great, and a lot of times I can enjoy films for style over substance, but this was one where the style was cool, but it wasn't so aggressively cool. Like, Beyond the Black Rainbow is a fine example. That movie doesn't totally make sense in what it's trying to do, but the style and the tone is so committed to and so consistent that overall I liked it because I dug the style and the tone and the music. This one, it was just kind of all over the place. It really didn't work. It felt far longer than it was. I think this is roughly about 2 hours, and it felt like I didn't know when this was ever going to end. My lady and I saw it last night, and she felt like this would have made a much better short film. And I agree. If you took the first section of the movie and fleshed that out a little, or just stopped where that first story ends, I think it would have been a far better film than this kind of sputtering, running on fumes thing that kept going and then kind of just ends. So I didn't like In Fabric in the end. I mean, I was kind of with it up to a point, but after a while I was just like, yeah, no, I've had enough of this. This is just kind of ridiculous. So not for me, but I'm sure it's going to tickle the pickle of a lot of people out there who are into strange, obtuse, silly, frivolous, wacky style exercises, which I guess is somewhat condescendingly is probably what I would call this. Anyway, In Fabric is out in theaters now. Here and there, it probably will not play too widely, so if you have an art house theater next to you, or you have a nice big multiplex that plays a good variety of films, you may see it, but I also feel like this probably won't linger for very long. Speaking of lingering for very long, this has lingered long enough in theaters for me to finally be able to see it. This has been out for several weeks. This I saw in the tiniest theater at Keene Cinemas when I saw it, which means it's probably not going to be around much longer locally here. And if you're watching this wherever you're watching it, it is probably on its last week or two in the theaters. This is another film for grown-ups. Wow, all three of our theatrical films are really films for grown-ups. We have Helen Mirren as a widower and Ian McKellen as a widower. Their spouses are both dead, and they're elderly, and they find each other again through Lonely Hearts ads, and Ian McKellen's not a great guy. He's a guy who perhaps maybe is pretending to like Helen Mirren so that he can get at her money, of which she has plenty. This is what happens when Helen Mirren meets the good liar. So a nice, intelligent movie for grown-ups. I mean, youths could watch this too, but you know, youths tend to shy away from films about senior citizens. You have Helen Mirren as a classy, kind of lonely woman living on her own who gets on some dating site, as does Ian McKellen, who's out there fishing for a mark, basically, not me, for somebody to take advantage of. And you watch this. It's not really cat and mouse so much as, you're seeing Ian McKellen talking to his friend who's helping him scheme to, swindle Helen Mirren out of her money, and then you're watching him with her being, wonderful and loving and tender and fragile and all this other stuff, and you're just waiting to see, what is his plan, and is he going to fool her, or is she going to catch on to it? It's a good, intelligent thriller. It's very simple. The cast is only a handful of people. There are no, dirt bikes jumping onto moving trains, although in Super Cop that was fantastic when Michelle Yeoh did that. There are no, laser fights. It's just people. It's people with good intentions and people with bad intentions, and the twain meet. It's very interesting to me. This film has a twist to it. It has a couple of twists. One twist I assumed from the beginning was going to happen. The other twist I never saw coming, and this film becomes something a little different that, thank God, is not hinted at in any trailers. Most trailers give you the entire arc of a film minus a couple of moments. You can pretty much figure out a whole film from the trailer most of the time. And happily, this film did not do that. This film did not give away either twist. And one of them, as I say, when it happened, it wasn't like shocking, knock me off my seat. It was just like, wow, I didn't think this movie was going to go here. And it does, and it sticks with it, and it's interesting. And it's dark. Some of this is very dark, but it's really good, and it's a good film for grown-ups. And this is one that I would recommend to intelligent adults. If you're sick of seeing movies about battles and space things and video games and superheroes, this is a movie about people that is relatively realistic and intelligent and is probably not long for theaters much longer. So I would highly recommend. I didn't think it was great, but again, if you're just looking for a good, smart movie that's grounded in the real world with good actors in it, I would pretty highly recommend The Good Liar as a decent evening out, a decent matinee. It might not be a film you remember for a long time, but it'll be one I think you're glad you went to see. So that is all that I saw that was new in the theaters this week. Saw two other things that I will get to if I have time after the video releases. But now we move on to video, which is, for better or worse, in my opinion worse, how most people see films these days on the streaming service or cable channel or video on demand or Blu-ray, DVD, VHS tape, wax cylinder of your choice. First up, let me check. Oh yeah, that one. Jennifer Lopez returns to the screen. She hasn't been in a movie in a little while. Or if she has, they've been movies that just nobody cared about. This is a film about a team of dancers at gentlemen's clubs in the big city who decided, these clients, they have a lot of money. And, maybe we deserve a little bit more of their money than they want to give us. So we're going to just slip a little something in that drink. We're going to do a little something extra. And maybe we're going to just, well, as dancers, we'll be hustlers. Based on a true story, yet again, to some degree. This is, again, the tale. It focuses on a young dancer who's sort of new to the game, and she meets Jennifer Lopez, the older, more experienced dancer, and Lopez sort of drags her into this scheme of taking guys out, pretending that they're not dancers, meeting guys, in bars and all getting together and wining him and dining him and getting him, doped up and loaded, and then going to a club and spending tons of money, at which point they would get a cut of that money back from the club. And basically that's the tale of the film, is how they turn this into this hustler squad who just shakes down rich Wall Street guys or affluent Wall Street guys, and then they leave the guys behind. And what's the guy going to do? Tell everybody that he went and spent too much money at a strip club, so they generally don't report it. And eventually things go too far. They get greedy and they step up their game a little too much, and then it's this central character trying to figure out how to deal with that and how to reconcile, making a decent living for her and her child and her family with doing things that are really, really wrong. Really well shot. It's relatively, it's sort of a dark story to a degree, but it is fun at times. It is funny at times, and everybody in it's quite good. I will say though, Cardi B, not an actress, former dancer, a performer of some degree musically, not an actress. Just glad she wasn't in it any more than she was. I enjoyed Hustlers. I thought it was fun. It reminded me of other films. I can't tell you off the top of my head what those films might be, but films about groups of people coming up with a scheme to make money, and it doesn't quite go the way they planned. And then I think at one point when I saw this in the theater, I thought it reminded me of Boogie Nights to a degree, or some other film where somebody is in over their head and they realize they have to get out, and they're waiting for that moment to get out, and maybe they wait a little bit too long, and they're in a place they really don't want to be, and they have to try to figure out how to get out of it. So Lopez is very good in this, actually. She can be a very good actress, but obviously she knows how to dance and perform, but as far as a magnetism is quite good in this film, I thought. So Hustlers is out now, and I liked it. And I actually saw Hustlers with a friend of mine who is a dancer, and I wanted her to come as like an expert witness. And she sat next to me in the theater, and I would look over, and she'd like nod her head or shake her head or whatever, telling me how accurate the club scenes were. And apparently they were fairly accurate in this film as far as how it all operates. So speaking of operation, we have the second slice of the second cut of a gigantic Stephen King story that was made as a TV movie back in 1990, which I saw at the time and liked, and that was turned into a two-part film. Originally, this story bopped back around in time. You had these adult characters reflecting on their childhood and then back again, and the way the filmmakers decided to split this story into two films was you had the childhood sequences in part one, and in this part of the film you have the adult sequences. So the now grown children who survived the evil Pennywise clown epidemic of the 1980s are back again to do battle, hopefully to the death, with that evil nose honker in It, Chapter 2. So I'm not really thrilled with these It movies. I thought the first one was fine. I thought the best parts of the previous It Chapter 1, if you will, were just the things about the kids relating to each other, just being friends and dealing with bullies and dealing with home life and just dealing with life in general. The fantastical elements I thought were the least interesting part of the previous installment of It. So we bring back those characters now grown, now 20-something years later, they're all adults living their own lives. And the way the story goes is this town of Derry, evil things abound, but once you leave town, you leave the city limits, that fades from your mind. That's part of the evil of Pennywise, is that you forget, so you can't call help to come back. He'll just stay there and just keep picking people off. So these people all come back because one of their friends passes away. I think that's why they come back. It's been a while since I've seen this. At any rate, they all come back. And they start remembering things, and this leads to flashbacks from their youth. So if you really, really liked the kid actors in the first part of It, and you thought you're not going to get them anymore, you do get them. You do get chunks of those kids again in this film, along with their adult versions, which are pretty well cast, I thought. You have Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader. You get some people you recognize in there, and it is very funny at times. A lot of the horror elements of this were not scary to me. What creeps people out is subjective, and modern audiences are probably more programmed to be creeped out by special effects and jump scares than me. Jump scares annoy me and don't scare me, and special effects just take me out of what I'm watching. There's a whole lot of just weird CGI stuff that were, to me, more silly than anything else. The Pennywise character I don't find scary in these films. I find it just kind of trying too hard. I felt like the Tim Curry, not to compare it to the original, which I really haven't seen maybe more than once since 1990. To me, Tim Curry in the original, I always say this when we talk about these movies, it's a bright, sunshiny summer day, and you look out and there's a clown standing there in the middle of the town common. And it's creepy as hell because there's no reason there should be a clown standing there. In this film, you look and you see the clown, and he's like 10 feet tall with giant teeth and bug eyes and brah, and I'm like, okay, yeah, great, you're trying real hard. So I really didn't like It Chapter 2 all that much. I thought the first movie was okay, but this one, it didn't quite work for me. It's okay in spots, but overall, I'm not really emotionally invested in this story as told in this two-part film. If you are, you certainly get a lot more of it. It's certainly gory at times. The actors are certainly good, but it didn't connect for me for whatever reason. If you loved the first one, I can't imagine you're not going to like the second one. If you hated the first one, I don't know that this one would turn you around at all, but it is now out on video, so you can put them together, and what do you got? Bibbidi bobbidi It for it's around the corner. It's all available now, as well as the original. So you could watch the original, which was, again, also a two-part TV movie, but that just split the nonlinear story in two parts as opposed to making it more chronological like this one did. So we now move on to, so at some point I'm going to do my best and worst of 2019. I'm going to wait until January to do that because who knows, the best movie of the year may just come out in the next few weeks and the worst films of the year may come out in the next few weeks. But I'm going to tip my hand now. Unless I see something that really kicks my ass, this next film is my favorite movie of the year. This is Quentin Tarantino's latest film, set in a semi-fantastical Hollywood of 1969. It stars Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and Margot Robbie. Brad Pitt plays the stuntman of Leonardo DiCaprio, a fading TV Western star who's having a hard time finding work, having a hard time battling the bottle, and finding out that when Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski are your neighbors, things may get a little weird once upon a time in Hollywood. I love this movie. I love this movie the way I have not loved a movie maybe since Boogie Nights. That was the last movie that I saw that really just grabbed me by the lapels and yanked me into the world that it had created. And I just wanted to watch it over and over again. I saw this movie, I think 3 times, maybe 4 in the theater. My lady saw it about 6 times in the theater. I have a friend who saw it 8 or 10 times in the theater. It's the kind of film that you go back to, and every time I watch it, I want there to be a little bit more there. I want to watch it and maybe lean and look around the corner and see what's just out of the frame. It creates such a rich and tactile world of Hollywood 1969, specifically Hollywood like for just a few months in 1969. We start off with a clip for you see this film Bounty Law, which was a 50s, early 60s black and white TV Western show that starred this Rick Dalton, this actor played by DiCaprio. And then we move to the present day where he hasn't had a series in a while. He tried films and it didn't work out for him. And he's got a role as a bad guy on a TV Western with, it was kind of wonderful, Nicholas Hammond, who you may know from the 70s TV Spider-Man show or from The Sound of Music, hasn't done acting in a long time. He's excellent in this film as director Sam Wanamaker, who's trying to do this really heady, strange, methody thing with this former TV star playing the villain in this thing. So Rick Dalton has a role in this episode of Lancer, I believe it's called, the TV Western in the 60s, actual show. And we go back and forth in time between, you know, his past and shooting this episode of Lancer, and also we get a little bit of the history of his stunt double played by Brad Pitt, who's like his buddy and gopher and double when he occasionally does get work. And then we have their neighbor Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, and we get a little bit of their life, and you get all these people intersecting, and you get the Manson angle intersecting, and anybody who knows anything about history knows where this is all headed. So as beautiful as this is, and as fun as this is, and as lighthearted as it is, there's this dread in your stomach because you know where this movie is going to go. You don't know how far they're going to go with that, but it's leading toward that. And you get, as the film progresses, you see the dates, and you know, again, if you know the story, you know the date, or the month at least, and there's this awful twist in the pit of your stomach that you're like, just maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe we're going to end the movie before that happens. Maybe we're going to not focus on that. Maybe we'll do something else. Maybe we'll take this to Europe or something like that. The relationship between Pitt and DiCaprio is loosely based on Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, his stuntman, stunt double, friend, director, who directed, hey, what do you know, I happen to be wearing a Smokey t-shirt right now, funny enough, speaking of Burt and Hal. So it's based on that kind of two buddies who drink together and rough and tumble together and work together and all that in Hollywood. You get a cameo of some famous people. You get somebody portraying pretty well in a tiny cameo, Steve McQueen, which also it's been said that the relationship between these two guys may have been somewhat based on Steve McQueen and his stuntman. You get the Bruce Lee cameo, which is, this movie is called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is a fairy tale. This isn't actual reality. So things are, you know, made up. Things are they go their own way on occasion. So there is a scene where Bruce Lee and Brad Pitt's characters square off, and it's extremely funny. Some people were very upset that it portrayed Bruce Lee as an egotist or an idiot. I didn't take it that way. I know Bruce Lee was a cocky guy from everything I've read, and it didn't seem crazy out of character that he might have been showing off a little like that on the set of a show. You also see Bruce Lee as a very compassionate and happy guy training Sharon Tate for her role in The Wrecking Crew. Later in the film, the Dean Martin, Matt Helm film. It is this wonderful love letter to Hollywood in the summer of '69. The music is outstanding. The period detail is amazing. You really, if you're like me and you like this era, you really just want to step into this film. There is this aching yearning to go back to that time when you watch this movie. There's this aching for people like me who love this film, for the film to be a little bit longer. For the drive that Brad Pitt takes from his boss's house to the trailer he lives in out behind a drive-in, for that drive to be a little bit longer. A lot of friends I've said who I've talked to about this film, even after we saw it the first time, is that, we want a TV series or we want a whole movie that's just Brad Pitt driving around LA, talking to people, busting up bad guys, listening to the radio. The radio in this film is amazing. It's KHJ radio. It's an interesting element to this film. You hear a lot of original radio jingles and music of the day and news reports and things like that. And you hear it at various times in the film coming through the radio of just about every character. And it was a time when there was fewer media outlets, and radio did unite people in a way. Everybody was listening to the same thing, more or less. Everybody heard the news at the same time, the same way. It wasn't as fractured as it is now with the way we all get our information and media. And that's a really nice thing. The soundtrack to this, which is great, has those little radio spots spliced throughout the soundtrack. So it is like you're listening to the radio back then. I could easily do an hour on this film. I love this movie so much. The cast is incredible. There's a lot of cast members I haven't mentioned. Pacino is in it briefly. Kurt Russell is in it briefly. Zoe Bell is in it briefly. A lot of little cameos throughout that are really well done. Recreations of spaghetti westerns or Euro crime films, excellently done. The posters, the European, Italian posters that you see in the film for DiCaprio's fantasy films are excellently done. I can't say enough about this. This is a film I'm going to buy. This is a film like Boogie Nights and like my favorite films of all time. I'm going to buy this every time it comes out. When there's a newer format that has better fidelity and visuals, I'm going to buy it again. Oh, what, there's a deluxe edition with more extras? I'm going to buy it again. What, there's a version that comes with a poster and a t-shirt? I'm going to buy it again. I really, really loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't think it's for everybody. It's long. It's probably 3 hours, I think, 3 or more hours. But it creates a world that I don't want to leave, so that length did never bother me. It didn't bother me the first time. It didn't bother me the third time. It's not going to bother me the 30th time. I think this is one I'll be revisiting probably at least once a year for the rest of my days. What can I say? Movie of the year for me, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now we move on to the Arrow Video Corner. Arrow Video, there they are. That's the man. As you may know, Arrow Video is a British company that also has releases in the US. They do reissues. So what Arrow puts it out, it's not a new movie. Although that's not true. They do put out some new movies for the first time on video too, but they tend to lean toward catalog titles, genre films, horror, sci-fi, some action, some Japanese, some Italian. Here we have 2 English language films for the subtitle challenge. First up is a film, why not? Film from Jim Jarmusch that I'd never heard of, from 2009. So a 10-year-old film, stars, who does it star? Isaac de Benco. Sorry, Isaac, I mispronounced your name. The French actor, I believe, who is stars as sort of a criminal, sort of a hitman. We're not quite sure until the film reaches its conclusion, who has been given a task to do a thing in Europe, and he's just waiting around. A lot of this film is him waiting around and meeting odd characters who are giving him information, getting information from him, ultimately filling out the puzzle. I have to look over and see what this was even called. Putting all the puzzle together, and the film is entitled, here's a trailer, it may make more sense than anything I have to say today, The Limits of Control. Very much an art house film. I mean, it's Jarmusch, so it's going to be an art house film. Jarmusch will occasionally make a film that's a little bit more commercial than what he usually does, but his stuff is usually very quirky and contemplative and just odd. And this kind of fits that category. Shot in and around Europe. I cannot recall exactly where. I want to say France, but I'm probably wrong on that. And really, mostly it is this hitman kind of hanging around, not saying a whole lot, going here and there, going to a sidewalk cafe, going to a hotel room with a naked Paz de la Huerta in it, and doing a little something here and there with her, and talking to various oddball people who make cameos and give him strange diatribes about things. Tilda Swinton is in it. Strange diatribes about things, and then they leave. It's very odd and quirky, and it's the kind of film that if it wasn't shot as well as it is and have the visuals that it has, this is what I was getting back to earlier about In Fabric. A film cannot connect with me mentally as so much, but if it has great visuals throughout, that will rise it a little bit in my mind. So I loved the visuals in this movie and the vibe overall, and the music I dug. So I didn't mind the fact that it was odd and kind of slow. It ultimately, you meet Bill Murray in this film, who had worked with I think it was Broken Flowers that he worked with Jarmusch in. And Bill Murray he's like the best person in this movie. His scene is very short, but he is mostly dramatic in his scene, and he's just like really solid. He's like Alec Baldwin in Glengarry Glen Ross. He comes in, he does his thing, he just grabs you by the lapels and says, "Look at me," and then he leaves, and you're just like, wow, that was really good. So Limits of Control, again, not for everybody. If you're a Jarmusch fan, obviously Arrow is probably going to be the edition you want. It's got a great looking transfer. Not really loaded with extras, as Arrows sometimes are. I think it has maybe 2 featurettes on it, and that's it, if I recall correctly. And it's not a terribly long movie from what I recall either. But it's interesting, and it's gorgeous. It looks great. So if you're a fan of Jarmusch, it's certainly worth looking into. If you're a fan of Europe, it might be worth looking into. Or Bill Murray, again, he's in it for like 2 minutes maybe, but if you really like Bill Murray, it's actually kind of worth checking out just for him. So that is out now. Actually, that's out this week. I think that's out tomorrow. That's like the one title I'm on top of. So one more, we'll swing over here and we'll tell you about this film. This is another Arrow release from 1986. I remember seeing the video box of this in the video store, and I remember when this played a lot on HBO at the time. This is a film about a woman whose sister has gone missing somewhere in another part of the world, and she decides to enlist the aid of a man who has action-adventure paperback novels written about him, but he's a real guy. And she's going to enlist his aid to fly off to South Africa and help find her sister, and the only man who can do it is Jake Speed. Always appreciate the explosion. So this is a film, I might have seen a little of this on cable at the time. I remember the video box, the word Jake Speed in the logo, or the logo Jake Speed, was like the Raiders font. And I remember thinking at the time, well, this is just some Raiders knockoff. Because at the time, there were a lot of Raiders knockoffs, like the Further Adventures of Tennessee Buck and things like that. So I never really paid attention and watched this until like a week ago. This film was made by people who had been behind the scenes on some movies of the 80s that people really know about, like Valley Girl and Night of the Comet. The production team did this movie too, which shocked me because I thought this was some little film. I always thought this was Australian for some reason, but it's not. It was shot in Zimbabwe, of all places, and the writer of the film is actually, the star of the film is Jake Speed. You have Karen Copins and Dennis Christopher, who you might recognize, and a couple other actors you might recognize. Donna Pescow is in this. I was really shocked to see so many familiar faces. It's an action comedy. It's a very light, think about Romancing the Stone, very much like the vibe of Romancing the Stone. So people go off to this other country, and there's explosions and car chases and a wisecracking hero and light adventure and a lady in peril, and it didn't add up to anything that I really cared about, unfortunately. It's certainly pleasant enough, and it's got a good light tone to it. And at one point, you see Jake Speed's fake IDs, and I froze the frame on it. I wish I brought the still with me. It says, his driver's license says Keene, New Hampshire on it, which is where I'm sitting right now. And of all the places in the world for somebody to pick for a fake ID, the fact that it was Keene, New Hampshire is hilarious. They had the zip code wrong and a street that doesn't exist, but still, it was mentioned. So if you're a local person and you see Jake Speed, pay attention to that, because that's kind of cool. This town, other than having Jumanji shot here, this doesn't get mentioned in films all that much. And the Brown Bunny. For some reason, the Brown Bunny features some Keene footage. So I didn't love Jake Speed. It wasn't really my bag. It was a little too, the action wasn't dynamically shot enough for me. I think and the whole movie wasn't dynamically shot and executed enough for me, so I really didn't get into the groove of it, but I could see how people would enjoy this, especially if you saw it when you were a kid. I think that's probably a big difference. Excellent addition here. It looks great. tons of extras, plenty to tell you all about the world of Jake Speed, and that is out now via Arrow Video. I'm being told that's the end of my time here, so I am going to wish you a pleasant week. I should be back on Monday with something to talk about if I can manage to get out to the theater this weekend. I'm pretty much caught up with Arrow. But until next week, I am Mark, I am the Cinemaniac, and I will see you at the movies. Bye.